Hello everybody, welcome to MSI, which stands for Murders She Investigated. I'm Zoe. If you are new to MSI, you are invited to subscribe this channel. In this video, we are going to look into the wreckage. According to the MH370 final report, by 2018, 27 pieces of wreckage and or debris had been found. Although there have been a few more pieces found since, the 27 pieces reported in the MH370 final report are sufficient for the sake of an examination. The MH370 final report divides the 27 pieces into 5 categories, namely confirmed, almost certain, highly likely, and not identifiable. On the screen, you can see the parts and debris found with respect to the aircraft. Notice the green rectangular boxes. There are 3 of them. They are confirmed to come from the missing aircraft, so claimed the MH370 final report. With no exceptions, all the 27 pieces were found along beaches on or near the eastern coast of Africa. At the top left of the screen, there is a map showing the locations where wreckage or debris were found. The first piece of wreckage emerged on July 29, 2015, at the beach on Reunion Island. Reunion Island is a French territory in the Indian Ocean. The wreckage was shipped to France for examination. A month later, the wreckage was confirmed to be the right flight plan of MH370. This was evidenced by a serial number on a part of the flight plan. The examiner used the serial number and identified the part manufacturer. According to the manufacturer's record, that particular part was delivered to the Boeing company in 2002 to build a Boeing 777-200 model. The destination was MSN 404, allocated to customer Malaysia Airlines unit number WB175. The manufacturer's data matched the description of the Boeing 777-200 model delivered to Malaysia Airlines in May of 2002, with a registration number of 9MRO. The emergence of the flight plan was inspiring. More people believed that MH370 was somewhere at the bottom of the southern Indian Ocean. It was also hoped that there were more broken pieces floating on the ocean, and some of them would be carried by the ocean currents to a shoreline like the flight plan. During the following 19 months, 26 more pieces were found along the African coastline. However, there are 3 important observations worth noting. Firstly, when the flight plan wreckage was found on Reunion Island's shoreline, there were barnacles growing on it. But the next 26 pieces found appeared free of any marine life when first found. Usually, surfaces on objects submerged in the sea inevitably have some sort of marine life growing on them after a period of time. How does one explain the lack of marine life on the 26 pieces of wreckage? Secondly, the 26 pieces found subsequently or during the period between December 2015 and January 2017, a total of 14 months. Given the size of the Boeing 777 and the constant ocean currents, one would expect hundreds or even thousands more pieces of wreckage continuing to emerge on the African shoreline. But this did not happen. Why not? Thirdly, of the 26 pieces found, more than a dozen were discovered by Glenn Gibson. Glenn is an American unrelated to any of the victims on board 370. Given the scarcity of the wreckage, how could Glenn be so lucky to find so many? Furthermore, what motivated Glenn, a man in his late 50s, to become a full-time wreckage hunter for years? How did Glenn finance his wreckage hunter lifestyle? Jeff Wise is an American journalist who writes articles on aviation and adventures. He has been following the MH370 incident since day one of the tragedy, and has pondered on the three observations just noted. From extensive inquiries, Jeff concluded that none of the wreckage or debris found was carried to shores by the ocean currents. Instead, he argues, the wreckage or debris was planted there for Glenn and others to, quote, find, end quote. That was why there was no marine life growing on any of them except the flypron. As to the flypron, although it had barnacles growing on it, Jeff argued that the size of those barnacles suggests they were 5 to 6 months old. If the flypron was indeed carried to the shore by the ocean currents, it should have been in the water for 17 months. The size of the barnacles suggests the flypron was in water significantly less than 17 months. In other words, the flypron was also planted at Reunion Island by someone. Additionally, Jeff obtained a French report that was not officially released to the public. According to the report, some French experts believed that the flypron was entirely submerged when in water. The opinion was based upon where the barnacles grew on the flypron. Interestingly enough, there was another group of French experts who did flotation tests of the flypron. They observed that much of this type of flypron would be above the waterline when floating naturally. The French reports reinforced Jeff's opinion that the flypron was not carried to shore by the ocean currents. Someone planted the flypron at the beach on Reunion Island. Jeff not only argues that the 27 pieces of wreckage found were staged, he also found Glenn Gibson suspicious. According to the news reporting, Glenn was an American lawyer in his late 50s. He gave up his practice and became a full-time wreckage hunter. He dressed himself in such a way that reminded people of the movie character Indiana Jones. He spent most of his time up and down the African coastline looking for MH370 wreckage. He showed up at the MH370 anniversaries every year. At the 2015 anniversary, people hardly noticed his presence. But since the 2016 anniversary, Blaine has been embraced by the victims' families as a friend, a man full of compassion. This change in perception was because Blaine found a piece of wreckage on the Mozambique shore on February 27, 2016, 8 days before the anniversary. The piece he found had, quote, no step, unquote, stenciled on it, and looked like the horizontal stabilizer panel of an aircraft. It was Blaine's first find. Out of curiosity, Jeff looked into Blaine's past. It turned out Blaine was hardly a lawyer, nor did he sit on a fat inheritance as reported by some to allow him an exotic lifestyle. On the other hand, for decades, Blaine had Russian business connections. Jeff published several articles on Blaine Gibson and the MH370 wreckage over the internet. They are informative and worth reading. Based on Blaine's Russian business experiences and connections, Jeff believes that MH370 was hijacked and flown to an airport in Kazakhstan, a country adjacent to Russia, Mongolia, and China. Jeff also believes that the Kremlin was the mastermind behind the hijacking. Blaine was a secret agent working for the Russians to mislead the public to believe that MH370 was at the bottom of the Southern Indian Ocean. Although MH370 was hijacked, the Kremlin was not the mastermind because the evidence shows there is a better candidate. As mentioned earlier, many pieces of wreckage were found in 2016. It attracted a lot of publicity. However, Malaysia's Najib government was not excited. All the pieces discovered by Blaine and others were kept in storage for months in Africa. It did not occur to the Najib government to retrieve the wreckage until criticism mounted publicly. What does the lack of interest suggest? Does it mean the Najib government was aware that the wreckage had no investigative value? In the earlier video of Malaysia Air Force playing inept, it was concluded that MH370 was diverted to execute a pre-planned secret military action. This in turn explained the Najib government's cold response to the wreckage found. In 2019, another American journalist, William Lynch Wisha, published an article titled What Really Happened to Malaysia's Missing Airplane. In that article, William gave an account of Blaine's whereabouts before he emerged publicly as a compassionate wreckage hunter. According to William's article, when the MH370 incident took place, Blaine was in Carmel, California. He watched CNN about the disappearance of MH370. A few months later, the house in Carmel was sold, and Blaine moved to the Golden Triangle in northern Laos. Blaine said that he had a business partner there, and they were going to set up a restaurant on the Mekong River. Meanwhile, he kept a close watch on the developments of the MH370 incident. At times, he would go to Cambodia's coast to visit friends. Being an American with Russian experiences and connections, How did Blaine acquire friends in Cambodia or the infamous Golden Triangle? It was a bit odd. In March of 2015, Blaine went to Kuala Lumpur to attend the commemoration of the MH370 incident. After the commemoration, Blaine approached Grace Nathan, whose mother was on board MH370. She had become the representative of the victims' families. Blaine asked Grace if she would accept a hug from a stranger. Grace agreed, and then they became friends. After the commemoration, for some reason, Blaine flew to Myanmar, followed by visits to Maldives and the islands of Rodrigues and Mauritius. Everywhere he went, he talked to the locals to check if anybody had seen debris resembling parts of an aircraft. In July of 2015, the flyplane wreckage emerged at Reunion Island. Blaine flew there and found Johnny, who discovered the flyplane earlier on the beach. Blaine asked Johnny some questions, and he poked around for other debris. He did not find any. However, a newspaper reporter on Reunion Island found Blaine. The reporter interviewed Blaine for a story about an independent American investigator who was keen to search for MH370 wreckage along the coastlines. Blaine flew to Australia next to speak with two oceanographers, Charitha Petiarachi and David Griffin. Charitha was in academia and David an advisor to ATSB. That led the multi-nation search team to look for MH370 then. Given where the flyplane was discovered, Blaine solicited from the two their professional opinions as to the location where floating MH370 debris were most likely to come ashore. The answer was the northeast coast of Madagascar. The Mozambique coastline was also possible, but the probability was less. For some reason, Blaine decided to try his luck in Mozambique. He arbitrarily chose a town called Vilanculos and went there in February 2016. 20 minutes after Blaine arrived at the beach, bingo, Blaine found his first piece of wreckage on February 27th, just in time for the second MH370 anniversaries. This time, at Kuala Lumpur, Blaine was warmly greeted by many family members of the MH370 victims. Recall that Blaine went to the Golden Triangle where he was going to set up a restaurant. Apparently, he had forgotten his business plan. The places Blaine traveled to, such as the Golden Triangle, Cambodia, Myanmar, had no known Russian tracks. Rather, those areas are known for their underground economies, where China's secret agents played significant roles. If Blaine was a secret agent, as claimed by Jeff Wise, he was more likely working for China, not the Russians. Back to the MH370 wreckage. Notice that the 27 pieces recorded in the MH370 final report were all external parts except for 3. Those 3 items were supposedly from inside of the fuselage, but none of them were fully confirmed though. On the screen is a table showing more information about these 3 items. Item number 5 is a door R1 storage closet. Item number 11 is a seat back trim panel. Item number 16 is a cabin interior panel. 2 of them are almost certain, the other is highly likely. Now, if the 3 items indeed came from the MH370 fuselage and were carried ashore by the ocean currents, it suggests 2 possibilities. One is that the plane crashed into pieces and the items inside the fuselage were scattered around, floating free. Alternatively, the plane landed on water with the fuselage submerged as a whole piece, but cracked to form a path. Water and constant currents made items inside the fuselage floating out from the path. Either way, there had to be more than 3 pieces found over time, but there have been no additional interior items found. This suggests there was a probability that the 3 items were not from MH370. They were from another plane. Had another Boeing 777-200 model crashed, making parts available for wreckage harvesting? The answer is yes. On July of 2014, Malaysia Airlines suffered another blow. Its passenger flight MH370 was shut down while flying over Ukraine. Flight MH370 was also a Boeing 777-200 model. According to public information, Malaysia Airlines ordered a total of 17 Boeing 777-200 models in the late 1990s. One by one, they were delivered to Malaysia Airlines when finished. The registration numbers for MH17 and MH370 were 9M MRD and 9M MRO, respectively. Given the above background information, it seems at least possible that the 3 items in discussion come from MH17. If so, it certainly explains why there was no sign of marine life when they were first found. This possibility is consistent with Jeff's theory that the pieces of wreckage found on the African coastline were not carried there by ocean currents. They were planted there by someone to mislead the public. The MH370 final report gave detailed account of the 27 pieces of wreckage. Of the 27 pieces, only 3 of them are confirmed MH370 parts. In other words, the other 24 pieces are not reliable evidence. The 3 confirmed pieces are Item 1, the right flaperon, Item 10, the left outboard flap, and Item 19, the right outboard flap. All of them were external parts. This was in line with Larry Vance's theory that the MH370 fuselage remained as a whole piece, with everything inside the fuselage resting at the bottom of the sea. Larry Vance is an experienced Canadian air crash investigator. He firmly believed MH370 did not crash into the ocean. He said if there was a crash, the impact would have produced millions of debris floating on the ocean surface, But apart from the limited wreckage pieces, nobody has identified substantial floating debris. After the flyplan was found, Larry and his partner, Terry Hisler, studied the wreckage photos thoroughly. By, quote, reading, unquote, the wreckage, they concluded the following: that there was a pilot flying the plane to the end, that the MH370 did not run out of fuel at the end, that at the end of the flight, the pilot extended the flyplan and performed a controlled water ditching, that the ditching job was well done and the fuselage remained as one piece, that the fuselage floated on the water for a while and eventually submerged into the water along with everything inside the fuselage, that it took a seasoned pilot to perform a successful water ditching, and therefore Zahari was most likely the rogue pilot who hijacked the plane and committed a murder-suicide. One can watch the Australian television 60 Minutes, where Larry explains how they derived their conclusions. It is enlightening to hear how to read the damage showing on the trailing edge of the flyplan to draw a conclusion that there was a controlled water ditching at the end of the flight. As to the rogue pilot, it is understandable why Larry suspects Zahari. After all, Larry was unaware of the evidence we have previously discussed that cast doubt about Zahari being the hijacker. In contrast to Larry's view as to what happened to MH370, the Australian ATSB held a very different theory. The ATSB insisted that during the flight, somehow, everybody on board perished, including the two pilots, Zahari and Farik. MH370 became a ghost flight. It continued flying until it ran out of fuel and dropped from the sky. It crashed into the southern Indian Ocean at high speed and piloted. Many experts and professionals in the industry questioned ATSB's ghost flight theory, especially after the discovery of the flyplan. They urged the ATSB to revise their ghost flight theory and redefine the search area accordingly. The ATSB rejected those requests in 2015. Why did the Australia ATSB act against the industry wisdom? It was because that the ATSB was merely a mouthpiece for the multi-nation search team that was made up of Malaysia, China, and Australia. The ghost flight theory presented by ATSB was a voting result of 2-1. In the third video of this series, Events Following the Disappearance, a question was raised then. Why was Chinese government so enthusiastic about participating in the search team? The ghost flight theory is a hint for the answer. The Chinese government wanted to use Australia to hard sell its version of the story to the public. Some may wonder how could China do so? The answer is by bribing and or intimidating Australia's politicians. This is all for the MH370 wreckage. If you are new to MSI, you are invited to subscribe this channel. If you are already a subscriber, a thumb up is appreciated. Feel free to share this channel with others. The MH370 incident deserves everybody's attention worldwide for the sake of safe public air traveling. Next time, the video is titled Passenger X unveiled. See you then.